Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
State Representative Staush Gruszynski is seeking re-election in the 90th Assembly District. He's a Democrat. The primary is August 11. Staush, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Well, it's a Democratic primary, so I've got to ask you, if you're reelected, if you win the primary, you're reelected in November, do you think you'll be back having committee assignments and being able to caucus with Assembly Democrats again?
Yeah, I believe I will. I believe that the caucus will honor the will of the people here in Green Bay and the district. I believe that my record and my work in this first term is why we're running. I believe it's why they're going to reelect me. We've been able to have some, great results here in my first term for the voters of Green Bay, and I fully expect them to follow the will of the people. Yeah.
Well, a few months ago, you had to issue an apology for something. How have you changed? What have you learned about yourself since that? Since the incident and the investigation, and there was a backlash from your fellow Assembly Democrats. How have you changed?
Yeah, Steve, I really appreciate that question as well. I want to be upfront with folks. I made some comments in a Madison bar. I had way too much to drink, and I apologized fully for those comments. I followed HR throughout the entire process. I really believe it's important to believe women, especially their words, when you make them feel uncomfortable. And I took responsibility for those actions. And then, moving forward, just personally as well, besides the remedial actions that were put forward by HR, which we fully followed, I moved forward and I'm 8 months sober actually now. It was a recommendation from HR, and I was kind of able to reflect on a larger issue that I had in my personal life, and taken some very progressive steps to make sure that never happens again.
Okay, enough on that. Let's move on to some issues, Staush. I appreciate you dealing with that.
Yeah, of course.
If the governor's right and we're $2 billion with a B short in tax collections, do we cut spending? Or do we raise taxes and fees? Please.
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve. I appreciate you asking it. First off, I want to be really clear that I believe that we should not touch K through 12 education funding in this state as we move forward to address budget shortfall for the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we can look for creative solutions that so far, Republicans haven't wanted to talk about or haven't wanted to really dig into. I think a good example of that would be Medicaid expansion here in the state of Wisconsin. It's something where we just saw Oklahoma pass it by referendum. That state's no liberal bastion here in the country. So, and they're able to cover 200,000 more people in Oklahoma moving forward. There's a recent article out that noted that there's over 400,000 Wisconsinites that have lost healthcare coverage during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think it's a great place to start and expand Medicaid here and take those federal funds back into the state. I think we can also look to close the dark store loophole, make sure that corporations are paying their fair share here in Wisconsin. Also having a discussion about capping the manufacturing and ag tax credits for millionaires in the state. I think we can have that discussion as well as we move forward, but we're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to be solutions-based as we move forward to handle that deficit.
New subject. Americans know a lot more about how some police officers treat those in custody than we did 2 months ago. The governor's special session package banned chokeholds, statewide training standards for police, ban no-knock warrants, et cetera. Do you support that package, or does it not go far enough?
First off, I do support that package, and I believe that it's been far too long already. We should have a special session. We should have taken action on that legislative package, but it really cannot be the end of the conversation. And I really believe we need to listen to the Legislative Black Caucus, who has made recommendations about how we move forward. That's about investing in communities of color in the state of Wisconsin, properly funding our schools, funding our transit, jobs programs here, moving forward. And I think first we need to listen. We need to listen to their recommendations, and then we need to act. And a good first step would be acting on the governor's call, but it needs to be more than that. And I hope we could do it in a special session, or look to do it in this next legislative session.
Another issue that the governor's offered, he wants a People's Commission to draw the next congressional and legislative boundary lines. The Constitution, as you know, says the party in power. Who's right?
Yeah, so I've been a strong supporter of the call from the governor for redistricting here. I think this is an issue that faces voters all across the state of Wisconsin. And it unfortunately only increases the partisanship that we see in Madison. I think people are sick of that partisanship. They're sick of the bickering that we see in the state capitol. And if we address redistricting in a fair way that draws fair lines, we're going to have more bipartisan legislation. We're going to have people that will reach across the aisle and work together here. And I'm excited about that future for the state of Wisconsin. And when I talk to people on the phone every day, you can tell they're frustrated with it. They're frustrated with the partisan gridlock that we see in Madison. And, throughout my first term, I've been proud to be able to reach across the aisle. I think it's a benefit of somebody that's, deep in the minority party in the state assembly. I've been able to reach across the aisle, work with Republicans, and pass legislation that's gotten results for Green Bay. But we need more of it, and I think the people are craving it. And if we can pass fair maps, that'll help lead us down that road.
New subject. Do you support legalizing both medical and recreational marijuana?
I do. Yep, I do. And obviously, I believe we should be able to put some safeguards in place. We want to make sure that, like alcohol and tobacco and other other things, that these products aren't getting in the hands of children. They're not targeted. The ads aren't targeted towards kids. We're not seeing that sort of stuff. But I fully support both medical and recreational marijuana legalization in the state. I also support decriminalization and expungement moving forward. I'm proud to have an A+ rating from NORML here in Wisconsin moving forward. And, it's not always talked about this way, but it could also help us with our budget deficit, moving forward as well as another tax revenue stream.
Property taxes. School districts, local governments operate with caps, limits on their property tax levies, limits that can be exceeded if they pass referendums. If you're reelected, do you think these caps, these limits on property tax levies should stay in place, or time to get rid of them?
So, Steve, I have 6 years of local government experience here in Brown County. I was a county supervisor on the east side of Green Bay. I've seen the tough situations that local governments have been put in, especially over this last decade because of these these levy caps. I would support lifting the caps. It's something that, our current Republican assembly hasn't really wanted to tackle, but it's a strain on local governments here. Also in Brown County, I'm proud to say we were able to pass a 0.5% sales tax here, that we were able to make a critical investment, a historic investment in our infrastructure throughout Brown County. We put that money towards fixing roads. We put that money towards rebuilding libraries and investing in our cultural institutions. We've also put that money into paying down our debt as a county and bringing down our property tax levy. So I think, allowing municipalities to have those tools at the very least would be important if we're not going to talk about removing the levy caps.
Well, given your experience as a local elected official working with the property tax, then how much local governments rely on the property tax. My question is it time to consider alternative sources of revenue, maybe broadening the 5% sales tax to now exempt products and services, or giving local governments and not just counties the ability to levy a half-cent local sales tax? Do we need to look at alternative sources for local governments, Staush?
Yeah, I believe we do. And I know there was a bill that was introduced for Milwaukee specifically over this last legislative session about a 1 cent sales tax increase. But, I think we need to give tools to local governments so that they can do what's best for their constituents. We've seen over the last decade that local control has moved away from our communities down to Madison. And I believe that we need to give those tools back to local governments. So I would support that, with the budget constraints that the city of Green Bay has. If they believe that that is the right choice moving forward for our constituents with a sales tax, I think it's a good avenue to try to move forward with as a state legislature.
Green Bay, Brown County, you've had a tough time dealing with COVID, I'm sorry to say.
Mm-hmm.
COVID not only puts a strain on local services, less revenues, it strains our medical services state government relies on. I guess if you're reelected and vote on the next state budget, we've all seen the frontline role that hospitals are playing. Do hospitals deserve even greater priority in the next state budget as a result of COVID?
Well, first off, I want to thank all of the frontline workers in our community at the hospitals here in Green Bay that are risking their lives every day to battle this pandemic and, to keep our Green Bay citizens safe. I will continue to fight for support of the Healthcare Heroes Act here, paid sick leave and more PPE for those folks. I also would also like to point out, I think the governor has shown good leadership on this issue as well. As some of the federal funds that have come into the state of Wisconsin, he set aside $40 million to help with hospitals on this issue. But as we move into this next budget, I think we should really take a hard look at Medicaid expansion again, but not only expanding Medicaid, looking at that reimbursement rate for hospitals as well, which is one of the lowest in the country. If we're going to expand Medicaid, we should address that reimbursement rate, make sure that it's fair moving forward here, and that we can help hospitals in another way as well. So.
Follow up on COVID.
Yeah.
Businesses that follow all the rules from WEDC or the National CDC on protection, health, and safety, should they be immune from frivolous lawsuits?
So I just want to say I come from a family of small business owners. I can tell you that small businesses are hurting in the state of Wisconsin, and we need to help them. We hear their stories every day. We get calls into our office about people trying to navigate the system, trying to sign up for federal loans to try to help those businesses. I believe, if you're following the DHS standards or the CDC standards and you're acting in good faith, you should be protected, right? But if you're a bad actor, if you're somebody that, is putting your workers at risk, if you're somebody that, is putting the people shopping in your stores at an unnecessary risk and you're not following those guidelines, you should be held accountable.
Okay, as a local official, let's talk about this scenario. When local governments authorize major public works projects, should there be bidding standards and requirements that give preferences to Wisconsin companies? The context here is a study that said in 2015, out-of-state contractors were awarded $72 million in contracts for these projects, but that doubled to $146 million in 2018. Please.
Yeah, so I do support these Wisconsin businesses. I think this is a product of the Walker administration and something that we've seen here because we've seen project labor agreements rolled back. We've seen fair bidder ordinances pushed away. Prevailing wage has been rolled back here in the state of Wisconsin under the Walker administration. And now we're seeing the fruits of that, of what's happening. And, coming from a family of small business owners, my dad being in the construction industry as well, I'll say, sometimes when you get the lowest bid, you get what you pay for, right? And I want to make sure that we're honoring Wisconsin companies. I want to make sure that we're protecting the investments that our constituents and citizens are making when they give us our tax dollars, right? That we're getting the job done for them here. And our standards are set at a high level. The folks on the job site are trained adequately, and we're helping to protect those Wisconsin businesses here. I was also proud to be able to sign on to the Buy American legislation that moved through the state assembly that was introduced by Representative Tip McGuire. And, that's something I support. We should be looking to make sure that we're making those best investments both here in the United States and in Wisconsin moving forward.
Just two final questions. Any central campaign issue that we haven't touched on yet, Staush?
Yeah, so in my first term, clean water has been an issue that has been incredibly important to me. I worked for an environmental conservation organization for almost a decade. It's something that I really invested a lot of time into in my first term as well. We went all around the state listening to constituents about water quality issues. And, I can tell you people are scared in some areas of the state to be able to trust the water that's coming out of their tap, right? And we were able to pass 10 bipartisan bills that I believe help protect people and help move us forward. I also worked across the aisle with Representative Joel Kitchens on a first in the nation clean water bill during my first term that would allow utilities to partner with farmers in the area to help with runoff issues and protect the Bay of Green Bay. And I'm proud of that work, but we still have a lot of work to do moving forward on that issue. And I think as we come back in this next legislative session, we need to be looking at a reliable funding source for that work. I think we can look to other states around the country like Minnesota who have already set this up moving forward to address water quality issues. But it's an issue I'm passionate about. Along with Senator Hansen, I co-authored a PFAS bill, the CLEAR Act, to help address those issues in my hometown, which is up in Marinette, where we had that contamination. I went to high school less than a quarter of a mile from that area. So I know a lot of folks in that community, but as we continue to move forward as a legislature, the PFAS issue is not going away. It's something that I think we're going to have to make critical investments in to address cleanup, to address brownfields, to make sure that we're taking care of the citizens in Wisconsin, and we're trying to mitigate the effects of PFAS here as well.
We're almost out of time. You want to highlight any differences between you and your primary opponent?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a big issue I would say is that I've shown leadership. I'm the only one in this race that has a significant amount of legislative experience. Both of my two opponents, not just my primary opponent, but both of my two opponents have less than 2 years of legislative experience. I think in this time where we're in these uncertain times moving forward with this pandemic, with big issues facing the state of Wisconsin, we need people in Madison that have shown that they can work across the aisle, that they can do things in a bipartisan way, that they can put the partisan bickering aside and really make sure that we're working for results and solutions in Madison. And I think that's something that I've been able to show throughout my first term. And one of the key bills that I worked on in my first term was being able to move to start the funding to move some coal piles downtown it's been at least a 40-year issue here in Green Bay. And it took reaching across the aisle to do that. And we're going to see a better environment and a better economy because of that work. And it's something that I think with my local government experience that sets me apart from my two opponents here moving forward. Also, I know that my primary opponent has also been critical about my attendance record for some meetings that as well. I want to state very clearly that I have a 100% voting record from the floor of the assembly. I'm proud of that voting record. I think showing up is a big part of this job. I mentioned the task force I served on, made 13 of those 14 meetings going across the state of Wisconsin. You know, my primary opponents had championed a task force on the school board where, you know, she was only able to make 5 of the 14 meetings. And I think that's unacceptable moving forward. And, you know, I'm somebody that's going to dig in, is going to get the job done, is going to look for results for the constituents of Green Bay, and is going to continue to fight for them.
Thank you. Democratic Representative Staush Gruszynski is seeking re-election in the 90th Assembly District. He's from Green Bay. Staush, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.